Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're taking on a concept that's, well, it's pretty mind-bending. We're talking about anti-time frequency.
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction, doesn't it?
Well,
But the idea is actually rooted in some very real scientific fields.
okay, so for our listeners who might be hearing this for the first time, can you give us a quick breakdown? What exactly is anti-time frequency?
Well, the basic idea is this. What if time itself has a frequency, kind of like a vibration or a rhythm that keeps it moving forward? And what if, just like we can manipulate other frequencies, light, sound, even gravity to a certain extent, what if we can manipulate the frequency of time itself?
Whoa, okay, slow down a second. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So you're saying time might have a frequency like a sound wave?
Yeah.
And if we could somehow create an opposing frequency, an anti-time frequency.
Exactly. It's like using noise-canceling headphones. The headphones create a sound wave that's the exact opposite of the noise you want to block out. They cancel each other out, and you're left with silence. What if we could do the same thing with time? Create an anti-time frequency that cancels out the normal flow of time.
That's a lot to process. So where does this idea even come from? Is this like legitimate science or are we in full-on speculation mode here?
It's definitely on the fringes of scientific thought, but the idea is actually inspired by research in fields like physics, neuroscience, and even consciousness studies. We're talking about those areas of science that are pushing the boundaries of what we know about reality itself.
This is reminding me of an episode I heard on the Mind Matters podcast, actually. They were discussing this with their AI companion, Gemini, and it got pretty deep.
Oh yeah, that was a great episode. I remember that one. They got into some really interesting ideas about how altered states of consciousness could be the key to unlocking this whole anti-time frequency thing.
Okay, yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember that part. They were talking about how things like meditation could potentially change our brainwave patterns in a way that might, I don't know, interfere with the frequency of time.
Exactly. The idea is that our brains are constantly emitting electrical signals, creating these complex patterns of brainwaves. And different states of consciousness, like deep meditation, produce different brainwave patterns. What if some of these patterns, particularly those associated with altered states, could actually interact with the fabric of time itself?
Hold on, you keep saying fabric of time. Is that like a real thing? Can we actually measure time in that way?
That's one of the big challenges right now. We don't have the scientific tools or the theoretical framework to even detect, let alone measure, this hypothetical frequency of time.
So it's like we're trying to build a radio to tune into a station that might not even exist yet.
That's a great analogy. It's like we have this hunch, this intuition, that there's something more to time than we currently understand. But we're still figuring out how to even begin to study it.
Okay, I get that. But let's say, just for argument's sake, that time does have a frequency, and let's say we do figure out how to measure it. How would we even begin to manipulate it? Like, how could our brains, even in altered states, generate enough anti-time power to actually make a difference?
That's where things get really interesting, and where the idea of altered states of consciousness becomes even more intriguing.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about it this way. Our brains are incredibly complex, constantly generating these intricate patterns of electrical activity. We know that different brainwave patterns are associated with different states of consciousness, alertness, relaxation, deep sleep, even those moments of insight or creativity. What if, in certain states of consciousness, our brains are capable of producing a very specific frequency, kind of anti-time frequency, that can actually interact with the flow of time itself?
So you're saying our brains could be like time-bending machines?
It's a bold idea, for sure. And it's important to remember that we're still in the very early stages of exploring these possibilities. But it's a fascinating line of inquiry. And it's not just physicists and neuroscientists who are interested in this. Philosophers have been debating the nature of time for centuries.
That's true. You've got all those different perspectives on time, linear, cyclical, even the idea that time is just an illusion.
Exactly. And then you've got all the contemplative traditions like meditation and yoga that have been exploring altered states of consciousness for millennia. They have a lot to offer in terms of understanding how our subjective experience of time can shift and change.
So it sounds like we're talking about a pretty massive multidisciplinary effort here. We need physicists to figure out if time even has a frequency, neuroscientists to map out what's happening in the brain during these altered states, philosophers to grapple with the big questions about the nature of time, and even practitioners of these contemplative traditions to offer insights from their own experiences.
Exactly. It's a truly fascinating intersection of science, philosophy, and even spirituality.
Wow, this deep dive is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started. It's incredible to think that exploring something as seemingly outlandish as anti-time frequency could actually revolutionize our understanding of, well, everything.
It definitely has the potential to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we never achieve complete control over time, the pursuit of this knowledge is pushing the boundaries of human understanding in truly exciting ways. And who knows what other breakthroughs might emerge along the way.
Okay, I'm hooked. So, where do we go from here? What are the next steps in this exploration of anti-time frequency?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to keep asking those big, audacious questions. Questions like, what if our current understanding of time is completely wrong? Or what would the world be like if time wasn't linear? Those kinds of questions can lead us down some very interesting paths.
Yeah, you're right. It's like we need to challenge our assumptions about time to really question everything we thought we knew.
Exactly, and that's what makes this deep dive so exciting. It's forcing us to confront those fundamental mysteries that have captivated humans for centuries.
I'm already starting to see the world in a whole new light, or maybe I should say, a whole new time frame.
I like that. And that's the power of exploring these mind-bending concepts. They can really shake up our perspectives and open up a whole universe of possibilities.
I can't wait to see where this exploration takes us next. This is going to be one wild ride.
Oh, you can definitely say that again. Buckle up, because we're just getting started.
So we're talking about manipulating time, but we keep coming back to this idea of altered states of consciousness. Can you break that down a little more? How does meditation or, any kind of altered state actually play into this whole anti-time frequency thing?
Okay, well, let's think about it this way. We all have those moments where we get completely absorbed in something, a good book, a project we're passionate about,
Yeah.
and time just seems to fly by, right? It's like we enter this different state where our normal perception of time kind of fades away.
Yeah, absolutely. I call those my lost weekend moments, even if it's just a couple of hours. But I'm still not seeing the connection to anti-time frequency.
Well, those moments are interesting because they show us that our experience of time isn't fixed. It can be influenced by our state of mind, our level of focus, even our emotions. And those shifts in time perception, those moments where time seems to speed up or slow down or even disappear altogether, some researchers believe those might be giving us clues about the potential to manipulate time more consciously.
Okay, so you're saying those lost weekend moments, those aren't just like subjective experiences. They could be hints about something deeper, something about the nature of time itself.
Exactly. What if those moments where time seems to slip away are actually glimpses into a different way of experiencing time, a way that we could potentially access and control more deliberately?
Now that's a thought-provoking idea.
Mm.
But how do we go from like accidentally falling into a different time zone to actually piloting the time machine?
Well, that's where the idea of anti-time frequency comes in. What if those shifts in time perception, those moments of timelessness, are actually the result of our brains generating a specific frequency, a frequency that interacts with, maybe even counteracts, the normal flow of time?
So you're suggesting our brains could be like time-bending antennas picking up and transmitting these special frequencies? That's pretty wild.
It's definitely pushing the boundaries of what we currently understand about the brain. But
Hmm.
think about it. We know that different brainwave patterns are associated with different states of consciousness. Alpha waves for relaxation, beta waves for focus, theta waves for that dreamy state between sleep and wakefulness. What if, in certain states of consciousness, our brains are capable of producing entirely new brainwave patterns? Patterns that could interact with the very fabric of time.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So you're saying that if we could figure out how to induce those specific brainwave patterns.
Exactly. If we could learn to control those patterns, maybe through practices like meditation or other techniques that alter our consciousness, then we might be able to generate this anti-time frequency on demand.
That's a pretty mind-blowing concept. But are we talking about like full-on time travel here? Or is it more about subtle shifts in our perception of time?
That's a great question, and honestly, we're still in the very early stages of exploring these ideas. It's possible that we're talking about both. Maybe there are different levels of manipulation, from subtle shifts in our personal experience of time to more dramatic alterations of the flow of time itself.
So it could be anything from slowing down time to speed up healing to actually, traveling to the past or the future.
The possibilities are pretty much endless, which is both exciting and a little daunting, right?
Daunting is definitely one word for it. I mean, the implications are huge. If we're talking about potentially altering the flow of time, we're also talking about some pretty serious ethical considerations. I mean, who gets to control time? What are the rules? What are the consequences of getting it wrong?
You're hitting on some of the most important questions surrounding this whole exploration. It's not just about the science, it's about the philosophy, the ethics, the potential impact on society as a whole. If we're talking about manipulating time, we need to be having those conversations about responsibility, about safeguards, about the potential for misuse.
It's like we're opening up a whole new Pandora's box, and we need to be prepared for what might come flying out.
Absolutely. This isn't just about pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge. It's about pushing the boundaries of our ethical thinking as well.
This is definitely one of those deep dives that's going to stay with me for a while. I'm already starting to see time in a completely different way, less like a rigid linear path and more like a fluid, malleable dimension that we might actually have some influence over.
That's the beauty of exploring these kinds of ideas, isn't it? It challenges our assumptions, expands our perspectives, and opens up whole new realms of possibility.
Okay, my mind is officially blown wide open. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think one of the most important things we can do is to keep asking those big, challenging questions. And to remember that even if we never achieve full-on time travel, the very act of exploring these concepts, of pushing the boundaries of our understanding, can lead to incredible breakthroughs and insights.
I'm definitely on board with that. So let's keep diving deeper into this rabbit hole, shall we? What else have you got for us?
Well, let's talk about some of those potential consequences you mentioned. Let's really grapple with the ethical dilemmas and the possible scenarios that could unfold if we were to gain the ability to manipulate time.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory, we've talked about the potential, but now I think we need to get real.
Yeah.
What would a world where we can actually manipulate time look like? I mean, are we talking flying cars and time-traveling tourists?
Well, probably not flying cars,
Yeah.
at least not directly related to time manipulation. But the societal changes, those could be massive, yeah? Like imagine a world where we could slow down aging.
Okay, yeah, immortality. Sign me up,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Well, not so fast. Think about the implications. We'd have to completely rethink our social structures, retirement, resource allocation. It'd be a whole different ballgame.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Suddenly, we've got people living for centuries, all wanting the same limited resources. Not to mention, would anyone ever want to retire if they weren't, getting old and frail?
Exactly.
Mm.
And that's just one example. What about the legal system? Criminal justice. Imagine trying to prove a crime that happened, say, 200 years ago when the witnesses are still alive, but their memories might be unreliable.
Okay, yeah, things could get messy pretty quickly. But what about the positive stuff? You mentioned healing earlier. Imagine if we could speed up the body's natural healing process.
Oh, absolutely. Broken bones that mend in days, diseases that are eradicated in weeks. The potential for medical advancements would be incredible.
That almost sounds too good to be true. But wouldn't that completely upend the healthcare industry? I mean, drug companies, hospitals, insurance companies, their entire business model is built around treating illnesses over time.
You're right. The economic and social ripple effects would be huge. We'd have to completely rethink our systems, our priorities. And that's not even considering the potential for, well, let's call it time tourism.
Time tourism. Okay, now you've really lost me. What's that?
Think about it. If we could manipulate time, why not travel to different historical periods, witness major events firsthand, maybe even interact with historical figures?
Whoa. Okay, now that's a whole other level of mind-blowing. But wouldn't that create all sorts of paradoxes? The whole stepping on a butterfly and changing the future thing.
That's a very real concern. And it highlights one of the biggest challenges of exploring this concept. The more we delve into the possibilities of manipulating time, the more we realize how much we don't know.
It's like we're peering into this vast, uncharted territory, and the further we go, the more we realize how much further there is to explore.
Exactly. And with that exploration comes a tremendous responsibility. We need to be asking those tough questions. What are the ethical limits? How do we prevent misuse? How do we ensure that this knowledge, if we ever acquire it, is used for good and not for harm?
It seems like this deep dive into anti-time frequency has raised more questions than it's answered. But maybe that's the point, right? To push the boundaries of our thinking, to challenge our assumptions about what's possible.
I think that's a big part of it, yeah. And to remind us that the universe is full of mysteries, full of things we don't yet understand. But that doesn't mean we should stop exploring, stop asking questions, stop trying to unravel those mysteries.
So even if we never achieve full-on time travel or learn to bend time to our will, the very act of exploring these concepts, of pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, that's valuable in itself.
Absolutely. The pursuit of knowledge, the drive to understand our place in the cosmos, that's what makes us human. And who knows what other incredible discoveries might emerge along the way. Maybe we'll find that manipulating time was never really the point. Maybe the real journey is the one we take within ourselves as we grapple with these big questions, as we expand our consciousness, as we strive to understand the true nature of time and our relationship to it.
Well, I think it's safe to say this deep dive has definitely shifted my perspective. Time will never seem quite the same again. I'm sure our listeners are feeling the same way. So, thank you for taking us on this incredible journey. And to everyone out there listening, keep those minds open, keep those questions coming, and who knows, maybe someday we'll be having a whole different conversation about time travel.
It's been my pleasure. Keep exploring, everyone.